morning, everybody. It's nice to be back with Inspired Conferences again. I'm a bit of a regular here. I'll ask my panel to come and join me. We're missing one of our panellists, but I'm sure she'll come flying in any moment. So we've got a really jam-packed day for you today. It's going to be really exciting. We've got some quite controversial panel debates because I guess many of you have been to FM events before where you watch panels and they're talking about the same old subjects. Would you agree? We tend to talk about the same things and nothing really changes. So today we've got two particularly interesting panel debates. The first one starting any moment now. Just to encourage you all to keep your phones on. It feels really strange saying that because when I first started doing conferences years ago, you'd always encourage the audience to turn their phones off so that nothing got disturbed. But obviously we now all work on our phones, but also we'd like you to be tweeting today about the event. So you'll see the Twitter handle was up there just now. It was at InspiredBeMedia, and the hashtag is #FMInspired. So do feel free to tweet, take photos, make comments, whatever you want to do during the day. It just helps to engage people who aren't here today to feel part of the event. Okay, so as Rishi said, I'm Liz Kentish. I think I've met most of you before. I feel like I tend to do the rounds of FM events, so it's lovely to be back here. And I'll just ask my two current panellists to introduce themselves.
So I'm Mark Tyson. I remember what I am at this time of the morning. So I run the property and FM business within Capita, which doesn't mean I run the Capita FM estate. I'm a market-facing team. And we do all sorts of things from sustainability to FM advisory services and high-performing buildings, which we might touch on during the debate, which is really about doing something different in FM, which is something I'm particularly passionate about, changing the mould and the processes and all the things that go around that. So that's me.
Thanks, Mark. Christine?
So I'm Christine White. Some of my colleagues are also here today, Craig, Caroline and Christine over there. I'm from AstraZeneca in Cheshire, responsible for the manufacturing site. It's a 103-acre site, very, very diverse, and as much as it covers R&D, corporate and manufacturing, which is quite unique in our network. We're also quite unique in the IFM arena. We don't just cover the traditional security, soft services, hard services. We also do an incredible amount around laboratory services, equipment maintenance, services to the laboratory. You'll hear a little bit more about that later on from Craig and Caroline. Looking forward to today. And I do know that Jackie's just arrived.
The panellist has just arrived. So let me just set the scene for this discussion. So we were asked to put something together about the next generation workplace. And we sort of took a sharp intake of breath and we thought, oh, we're going to have that conversation again about millennials. Well, we're not. We're actually going to be a bit more thought-provoking, I hope, in our questions and our comments today. So I wonder if people who don't work in FM or workplace really, I was going to say really give a damn, I'm going to say it anyway, really give a damn about whether the workplace is a fabulous environment for them. Does it really impact on people's interest in coming to work for an organisation? Does it really impact on whether they stay with an organisation or not? So my first question is to Christine. AstraZeneca have won quite a lot of awards recently over the last couple of years for your site at Macclesfield for the workplace experience. Does anybody really care? One, about the award, and two, about it being a fantastic workplace.
About the award, no. In true honesty, anybody outside of FM did not give a hoot about the award. They didn't even know that we were putting in for the award. But when we got the award, everybody wanted to know about it because suddenly it puts AstraZeneca on the map. But that's not the reason I put in for the award. The reason we put in for the award was because we'd done something really different. We were going through a real UK footprint change. If any of you know anything about AstraZeneca, you'll know we're moving R&D from Cheshire down to Cambridge. And as a result of that, that's a massive ask. And as part of that, we were asked to take in all of the people onto our Macclesfield site that weren't going to be moving to Cambridge. The Macclesfield site had been underinvested in for many years. It was seen as a sort of dirty manufacturing site. Nobody ever came through the gates, we don't want to go there. So to try and convince people to come to Macclesfield was an incredibly big ask. They were coming from a hundreds of acre site set in the woodland with sheep in the middle grazing on the grass to manufacturing site in the middle of an industrial estate in the middle of Macclesfield. Try selling that. So, and secondly, we had nowhere to put them. So where are we going to put all these people? You know, we haven't got anywhere. So we came up with the idea of refurbishing an old facility that actually we'd bought from Ciba-Geigy many years before, when we anticipated expansion. And we'd kept this building, we had the IT function in there, and they were just squirreling away doing nothing, nobody really cared what was going on in there. It was a very 70s building, sort of pink walls, brown doors, big corridors, insular offices, all of that sort of thing. And we work with a designer to come up with a completely different design. How do we transform this building so that people want to come and work here? And we did that, and it, you know, you can Google Middlewood Court and you'll probably find lots of pictures of it. It's been so successful that now I've got a problem getting people out of it. So nobody wants to leave Middlewood Court, nobody wants to go and work somewhere else. It's now over capacity, and I'm desperately trying to move people out of it. What's been successful in that building is it's about the design. It's almost a little bit about bringing the home into the workplace, and I'm not entirely sure if that's something I want to do. I'm still desperately trying to hold on to keeping work at work and home at home, but for the younger generation, they want to merge the things together. So we created this workplace where you don't have your own desk, you actually turn up and you sit somewhere that's vacant. We have a Costa coffee outlet in there, we have a pool table in there, we have various other things, and lots of collaboration space, lots and lots of places that are different than your basic desk that you can go and sit at. So it's been incredibly successful. I remember the day it opened, and it was a big, even I was wowed, and I'd been working on the project for 2 years, but when we opened it out, it was fantastic. And people came in, they said, "What have you got a pool table in here for? Who on earth is going to use a pool table?" And of course it was all the older generation. And by 10 o'clock that day, there was people playing pool on the pool table, and you see that every day now. So it's hugely successful, and part of that success is trying to put the right technology into the building. So we really partnered with our IT function to make the building successful, so that you could just sit anywhere and open your laptop and it would work. You could VC from anywhere in the building. You know, lots of the buildings are soundproofed. We have what we call confession rooms, which are just little quiet spaces, lots of quiet spaces for people to go and work in. And actually, we part of the reason we won the award was our collaboration with IT to do that. So do people care about that award? Yes, they do now, but they didn't when we first went for it. What it has done is put FM on the map in our company. So historically, people have thought of FM as, oh, they're the people that clean the toilets and provide that khaki coffee out the, you know, free machine, and they don't recognise it. Now we're recognised for actually being people who are creative, who can look towards the future, who can create something, a really outstanding workplace. It's still globally in AstraZeneca, carries the crown. I'm not sure how much longer that's going to last, because we've had people from everywhere wanting to do better. So Caroline's my competition at the moment in Cambridge.
So that obviously was a huge investment for the organisation, and I'm sure some of the people in the audience are sitting there going, well, that's all right for you, you're a pharmaceutical company, you've got lots of money. You think, yes. So a question to Mark, really, do you think we can create amazing workplaces without spending a fortune?
Yes.
Any examples you can share?
I think it's interesting. So many things I want to say. I guess my underlying thing that I've found in the last sort of 4 or 5 years working across lots of different things, actually, and in my role now is real estate. One of the reasons I wanted to work in a real estate business was to try and get involved in the design side of things and the broader world of real estate in terms of why you've got the building in the first place, lease obligations, all that lovely stuff. And I guess what I've found is a whole group of people who sometimes have got a large estate, not a lot of money from a capex point of view, but quite a lot of opex. as one of the things that sort of resonates with me, is that we seem to have this mindset in FM that we don't have any money, yet most people in this room will be sitting on multi-million-pound budgets. And the problem with that is they're often all committed to input specification FM contracts, i.e. SFG 20 maintenance, cleaning, periodics, all that lovely stuff. But actually, if you sit back and look at it just from a budget point of view, it's quite a lot of money. My second thought was most of the buildings in people's estates are old and decrepit, and they haven't got great life cycle plans. And then people sort of switch off to the fact, well, actually, if I haven't got lots of money and I can't design, it's interesting because I think a lot of what you said there is about design. How do we design a great place for people? I think people then take their mind off the fact that what if they just reorganise what they've got better already? So I think my view is you don't have to create an award-winning, amazing space from a design perspective, because, and this is one of my big bugbears, is that a lot of that is just academic. So the workplace designer will put a layout based on space utilisation, which is, in my opinion, counterproductive, because I've seen a lot of organisations, certainly in the last 12 months, coming to us and saying, oh, I've got these 2 office buildings and I've got 300 people in this building, 200 people in this building. I want to buy some new space with 200 buildings and go to a ratio of whatever that is, 1 in 4. I can't remember, it's too early in the morning, but you get my point. Great, we've saved a fortune on the lease. Yeah, our utilities bills are coming down. And then there's a little bit of a sofa area put in. I'm not a senior project. I'm just a lot of the office spaces I deal with. We've got a sofa area, and actually we've taken down a few meeting rooms because we need to have some extra desks and all this lovely stuff. And that's a quiet zone, and this is that and the other. Okay, so how's that going to operate when you put 400 people in a building that's designed for 200 people? What effect does that have on the plant? What effect does that have on the people? Which comes back to my main thing, is what impact is that having on people's health? So you can have the best design team in the world that's using space utilisation data, that are looking at floor plans and they're looking at breakout areas and all this sort of stuff. Until you actually put people in the space, I think everybody in this room are preaching to the converted, no, it won't operate how you expected it to. So what we need to do is we need to start measuring things we're not measuring. And if anybody's heard me talk about this stuff before, I've been saying this for 2 or 3 years now. Air quality, if we just talked about one thing, I don't think many FDs would make the same decisions they're making now about consolidating space if they knew of the impact on people's health. This is not productivity, this is health, by putting extra people in a space for a certain amount of time. So we've got studies going on and clients we're working with where they are putting people, and they didn't know before, into spaces which are 3 or 4 times the safe level of CO2. Right, so we'd say somewhere between 600 to 800 parts per million is a good level of CO2. Most office environments are operating at 600 to 2,000. Then when you overlay things like humidity and our old friend temperature, which is FM's big friend, too hot, too cold, yeah, that's often where we start with our conversations. Actually, the biggest enemy here is air quality. And I think, linking back to our point on the millennials, which is where I do think it's relevant, is that you've got a whole generation of people coming into your workplace that are going to start bringing their own sensors to work. And I don't think we think about that enough. And they're not ultimately not going to care in the long term if they've got a nice shiny office with a nice sofa and a pool table, if in 5 years' time they look at their sensors and their apps and they can see that you've been exposing them to conditions that are detrimenting their health. How many people do you think in that generation are going to stay working in your business? Do you see what I mean? So for me, it's not a design conversation. This is about operating our spaces differently, whether or not they're 50 years old or 1 year old. And I'll give you another good example. Everybody spends a lot of money on BREEAM, excellent or very good. Did you do that with your? No. Okay. I won't carry on. Anyway, somebody nodded over there, so I'm going to carry on. And just think, and if you've been involved in one of these projects, think of the intellect that goes into designing that building and into that model from an energy perspective. And then everybody walks away. As soon as you put that building live, all of those theories that went into the, I mean, we've got people like acoustics guys designing hospitals within an inch of how the acoustics are going to work, and then as a practical completion, they walk away and never see them again. I mean, it just blows my mind. So surely there's an opportunity as an FM community to take that theory and thought that might have taken 3 or 4 years to get to that point, these really clever models, into an operational environment, include things like BIM, include some of the wellbeing data I'm talking about, and educate our FMs on how to use that in real time. So you've got this continuous commissioning concept. So the short answer to your question is, I don't think we're spending our time in the right areas.
Okay.
Yeah.
So going back to this thing about the design process and the design team walking away and that's it at the end of the project, are we missing a trick when you look at some of the people who are studying FM So there are undergraduate and postgraduate courses in facilities management, building services, workplace, and these students of all ages are writing amazing dissertations and theses about our industry and the future of our industry. And I don't know about you, but I've seen, the whole time I've worked in FM, I've read one dissertation because I asked someone to send it to me. We just don't seem to be cashing in on some of the knowledge and the research that's out there that could be informing the design of our workplaces.
Where are they? And I think to go beyond that, it's how do we wake up the industries that we actually work for to the value of FM? Because it's only when we do that that we will start to get the true interest from our businesses in the value that FM brings, and then we will get the interest in the apprentices and the graduates and the sponsorship for people to actually develop in FM roles. They are key. You know, I frequently said to my boss, don't undervalue FM. I can shut you down in a nanosecond. I can stop your production just like that. And it's how do we wake them up to the value that this is a real profession. It is something that we should be waking our kids up to. You're right, they are going to be asking all the questions. It's already started. You know, in this building we've refurbished, it used to be a drug manufacturing facility. And we came across, unfortunately for us at the time, some drug that had been left in some ductwork. Well, nobody knew what that was. It took us months and months to be able to actually convince the residents in that building that we had made it safe for them. And they don't understand parts per million, they don't understand, you know, all of the scientific side. So how do you convince the uneducated about the harmful effects of buildings? And you're right, so we can spend a fortune on designing a building, and then the business wants every building to look like that, but they don't want to pay for it, they don't want to invest in it. They just think, well, put a bit of new furniture in and it'll look the same, won't it? Never mind what goes on above the ceiling or below.
So that's an interesting point. So what is your view on choice in the workplace? So how much of an individual choice should I have on lighting levels, where I work? What's another good example? The fit out in the office even, like actually the colours on the walls. I mean, the big one people go to is temperature. I was trying to avoid that, but there we go. How much choice do you think we should be giving people in the space?
It's interesting, this one. When you've got a big project, it's easy to engage lots of people in that, and you can get the views of all sorts of people. We set up mock spaces. I know down in Cambridge they're doing exactly the same thing. We've got mock areas, we're looking at furniture samples, lighting, all of those things. But if I come closer to home in our office, we have a constant battle in our office with, can you shut the blind, it's too light, I don't like that ceiling light above my desk, can we disconnect it, can we? You never ever seem to be able to pacify everybody. Where we went to in this project is a little bit further, which was to have adjustable lighting so that people had choice at their workplace. So that was at their request actually. Let's have desk lamps so I can increase the light if I want to. Ask me if those desk lamps have ever been used. No. People just actually get used to what's going on in the ceiling.
But aren't we trying to create workplaces where people collaborate more? Yes. And surely giving people personal choice about their workplace, doesn't that take away from the whole idea of collaboration?
It takes away from the idea of flexibility. So if you tailor a workspace for a particular very small population, then suddenly that workplace isn't flexible anymore. It's tailored to that individual population. So it's really interesting, you know, lighting, heating. How do you satisfy everybody?
So I think that there's a couple of things in this area which I've found in the last few years. One is that where do we start this one? So in change theory, something I learned a few years ago, is everyone needs to understand the score. It's quite a simple thing, I quite like it. It's like if you take football or rugby, anybody could drop in and watch that because they know that those two numbers are going to move and someone's going to win and someone's going to lose. If you look in FM, what is the score? I think it's a very important point because the score becomes SLA cards around 98% of PPM and stat compliance and periodic cleaning inspections and security inspections and all that lovely stuff, and then money, obviously, right? But nobody understands that out on the field. And the second issue I think that wraps around that is we've become so used to reacting to someone phoning a help desk. Honestly, if there's one thing that I think is our intrinsic problem in this industry, is our whole, if you think of the whole demand side equation is fixed on someone phoning a help desk because they feel a bit hot or the light's not great or whatever it might be, and that drives a whole trigger of action through a CAFM system to an engineer or somebody to go and do something. Yeah. So if you take those two things together, what I think we need to be doing is we need to be bolder, and taking on your point here, Liz, in saying to people, as an organisation, I want to influence you collaborating and being more productive. And to do that, we need to understand more about your task, and we need to understand about the environment, and the thing, not just environment, but things like mental health, which we don't talk about enough, and I don't know who else apart from HR really talks about that. Line management, actually getting people to take responsibility for getting the best out of their teams, which we're always frightened to talk about. And then overlay that with science. So one of the best things that we've found in the last few years is, well, I'll give them a name check. The Centric Labs, does anybody's worked with them? Does it deal with neuroscience? Anybody heard of them? Absolutely blows my mind. Now, they've come out of design, right? Because everybody starts in design with this stuff, because I think the metrics and the money's there. But what they're starting to say is, well, if we understand how your brain is going to operate in certain conditions, we can then relate that to a ROI and a productivity piece, and a health piece actually, to the task you're doing in the environment you're in. And then from that, you can start saying, right, by the type of team you are and the task you're performing, this is how we advise an organisation to get the best out of your space. Mm-hmm. So, and that doesn't say there's a one-size-fits-all. What that says is actually, by the task you're working on, these are the sort of environments you need, and these are the conditions around it, and on different days and different things that's going on. But you as a team will make that decision based on science. And I think that's the bit we've missed in FM, is we haven't ever had any science. We haven't had come into us and say, actually, if you work on these 5, and it literally does come down to 5 things for me: air quality, humidity, noise, light, and temperature. Did I say temperature twice? I always get those things wrong, the 5. I'm doing all right. So those 5 things become our scorecard. Yeah, so going back to my original point, that's keeping score, because everyone can understand that. And then the FM world needs to educate people and go out and say, this is why we have set up your zone, your area, or this space to do this, and actually work with your line manager to get the best out of it. Because we're not pushing information into that space.
That education piece, I think, is really key. So
Yes.
do we teach people how to work effectively in those spaces?
I think we attempt to. So again, another really interesting topic, because when we did this project, we had learned from others that it's all very well to put fancy furniture in a place, but if you don't tell people why you've designed it that way and how to use that space, they just sit at their desk all day. And we learnt from that, and we tried to educate people as they came to the building, and we put a lot of effort into it. Where that falls down is sustaining that level of knowledge for people within that building. And this building is supported from an FM perspective like there's no tomorrow. But the turnover of staff is so great in the building that trying to keep that education level up all of the time is just a never-ending task. So yes, I agree. You've really got to coach people to understand how to use the space you've created for them.
So I'll give a couple of practical examples, because obviously it just sounds like I'm talking about Utopia Fairyland. So we've done a project with Sony in Paris, where we've worked with them to measure these variables we're talking about and relay that back into their FM strategy, and actually how they then configure the floor. So interestingly, they thought they had a massive problem with heat, with temperature always, because that's what they were getting the calls. Actually, turns out they had a lot of problem with humidity, because the building wasn't set up properly and the landlord wasn't engaging with them about how they were using setting up the space. And then they had a huge problem around noise, which fascinates me, because the way that people were using the space wasn't how they expected it to. So it was all been designed really nicely, but everybody hated it. And it was because the way they put the meeting rooms, everybody congregated around the people that were doing quiet working. Right? So actually, from a very, very simple approach, they were able to engage with these people, move some people around the floor, engage with the landlords and improve the setup of the conditions, and let's call it customer satisfaction of the people in that space went straight through the roof. Plus they had the added benefit of educating them to say, look, as an organisation, this is what we want to give you. So this is Sony's commitment to you in this space. And we're starting to roll that out across other Sony locations. So I think it's not that expensive. It's just a mindset change. You've got to decide what's important on the scorecard. And I think we need to move away as an industry, away from trying to reinvent the wheel around PPM, statutory compliance, which are, in my opinion, are hygiene factors that just need to happen. That doesn't get you interested in the boardroom. And the other interesting story I've got around this one in terms of proving it is, I don't know if anyone, Red Bull Racing is something we did a few years ago at Mighty. And people always criticise me for going to sport on my analogies, but the reason I like it is that they are absolutely crystal clear on what makes that car go faster. So everybody in that team knows what they're supposed to be doing. And we ended up with 68 comfort policies in that building based on what they do. So rather than saying, here's a light on your desk, we'd say, right, because you're looking at screens all day and it's very, very bright, let's take the light levels down as a surround. And actually got some advice on that and engaged with the team to do that. And they were like, oh, this is incredible. And then what would happen is the engineers would walk around the building and go up to people and say, oh, I've just noticed that, we've seen on the screen that the lighting is dropping in this room. And people go, is it? And you go, I'm going to fix that when you go out home tonight, so you come back in tomorrow morning. So from a trust perspective in the space, what you're doing is you're saying to people, we're not just an FM team to wait for you to come and talk to us. We understand the environment, we're going to help you map it out, and then we're going to manage, and our commitment to you is we're going to manage to those five things. And that went right up as far as Christian Horner in terms of understanding how we were putting productivity to the car, because we identified a couple of areas where there was projects to improve ventilation or whatever it might be, but the ROI became on the brain. So actually that team there cannot do what they need to do because of X, Y and Z, and the FD just signed off straight away. And he actually said, and this is one of my favourite comments in my career, I wasn't in the room unfortunately, but he said, now I understand what FM does. That is why I know this is going to happen. But we need more people in the industry to be brave enough to change the measures.
We need to get to that intelligent workplace, which is what you're talking about, isn't it? Rather than waiting for somebody to complain, how do we preempt that? How do we, using whatever technology we can, even if that's a body, actually understand what's going on in our building at all times? I think we're far too quick in the FM world, certainly where I am, to react to the complaint of one individual.
Yeah, and we're risk averse, aren't we?
Yeah, so one individual complains and suddenly the whole thing's wrong. And we've got to try and get away from that. I think the interesting one that we haven't discussed at all in the workplace is smell. You know, I can't imagine that any of you have not come across the smell problem. You know, I can't have a microwave in the office because it'll smell. Well, that person across the room smells. What are you, FM, going to do about it? You know, that's it's another dimension that we have to try and bring in. You can put as much HVAC as you want in, but if somebody or something smells, it's not going to cure that. So it isn't. It's probably not one for today, but it is another interesting.
But that goes back to the whole principle of line managers abstaining from those things at the moment.
It's
too easy to put it. Line management don't get involved.
Transfer that to FM. Say, please, can you sort this out? That
but
must be
I
your
think
response.
any argument any of us in this room have really won is off data, and I think that's the problem in FM is we're not using the right data to have the strategic conversation. And the thing is, it's not even that expensive anymore. Like IoT sensors, they're so cheap. The question is, what are you going to measure and how are you going to use it? And I think as a community, going back to your original question, how do we engage the academics? We need to be a little bit more industry focused rather than individual silos. So by that I say there's a big debate, it hasn't happened this year much yet, but in-house outsource, who cares? I'll say that flippantly, if it's right for your organisation, everything's different, so you need to decide what's right for you. But actually what we need is the industry to lift up. So we need to share, we need to have an academic community that shares information between FM professionals and then helps us move that argument on. So you've seen it now, University of Reading, Sheffield Hallam, these guys are really putting some really good stuff together, but it's not really coming through to our clients yet because we are not being brave enough and saying, well, actually, as an industry, we want to improve. I mean, I did it myself at Mighty. I was very arms round Sheffield Hallam. I was like, come on, let's keep this. This is IP. This is very exciting, or that and the other. But then I realised it should be more like cheese on toast. So in the cheese on toast industry, not cheese industry, it's not cheese on toast, cheese industry, they only really care about the whole market going up because their theory is if you see a piece of cheese on toast on the telly, you'll go and buy cheese and then everybody gets it, everybody gets a lift based on the market share. But that is such a simple way of looking at it, but we don't do that in FM. We're like, oh, this is my little competitive advantage, actually I'm going to do this in-house better than you are. And as a result, it takes us longer to get there. So we have to start that cross-dimension piece, and we need to have, and this is where I think people like Biffam should really come in, start changing that policy debate, start shaping that agenda for the benefit of the industry, rather than letting commercial ventures try and drive their own silos.
But that hasn't happened, has it? So what can we do? Because you've got quite a lot of power in this room today. People, who are in high-powered jobs, or both client-side and outsourced. So what can we do as a group today to make that happen, rather than sitting here going, Biffam should do something, or IFMA should do something, or Rick should do something? What can we do?
You need to, well, if you want to do some of the stuff I'm talking about, you need to get an IT person. I love what you're saying about the collaboration with IT, because I think that's important. An HR person with an imagination. Which is not to say there's not a lot of HR people with imaginations, but generally...
Point to me when you
well, I can't remember what I was going to say now. Yeah, so trying to get a group of people in your business, and the other thing I would say is that, let's go back to my budget point. HR don't have a budget, right? Well, they do, but it's just 8 or 9 people or whatever their budget is from a people perspective. IT have got a stupid budget. It's crazy. They've got huge projects that they've got out of control, right? So that is not easy to control. FM, you guys, the biggest gift you can have to your organisation is to get those guys in a room and start saying, right, how do we start measuring our services differently? Because you're telling me your HR team aren't talking about wellbeing at the moment. Everyone in your organisation must have had a chat about wellbeing in the last few months. Mental health, yeah? All right, so that's your HR team's tick in the box. IT want to do agile working, flexible working, get servers in the cloud, all that lovely stuff. So that suits this conversation as well. And then also you've got your stakeholders, and you know what, we always do surveys with people, we know what people are thinking in organisations. So you've got that as a starting point, and then you just need to set the vision and say, let's work together to make this happen. Like, I think that is the biggest thing I think people can do, is start collaborating within their organisations and set a bigger vision around what they want to measure and how the sort of space they want. So go to the why is the thing. Why have we got this space?
Yeah, we need to try and understand what are the measures that we can valuably use to improve FM within the industry or within our sectors. Currently, I mean, you know, at Macclesfield we were measuring ridiculous things and just, you know, pages and pages and pages worth of measures. What for?
Yeah.
What do you actually do with all of that data? Stop doing it and let's think about what we can measure that's actually going to add value and give us information that allows us to improve. I'm still not sure that we understand what the right measures are to collect and that we've got the mechanism currently to collect them.
It's those 5.
Yeah.
Everything runs off those 5. Honestly, I could talk about this all day. If you think most of your costs in your FM budget is M&E, the stuff that the stuff that moves, all the reactive costs, all your capex and stuff, generally M&E. Light is controlled by lights, funnily enough. Heat, humidity, what's the other one? Noise even. All of those things are influenced by the HVAC equipment, yeah? And then the final bit is people. So you need to find a way, and that's what I'm saying, using some of these IT sensors to collect that data, and then overlaying that onto your PPM plan, overlaying that into your reactive data, and setting up some very simple rules and algorithms. There's a lot of people out there that can do that now. You then get on the front foot very quickly. And the beauty of that is everybody understands those 5 variables. It doesn't matter if you're the FD, CEO, or the cleaner. It's like, it's the NASA example, isn't it? If everybody, and it's that scorecard thing, if everybody understands what's important, everybody then works towards that, rather than this attitude we seem to have in our industry, which is, I'm going to screw the SLAs down so tight that you can't breathe. So I want you to maintain that plant. I don't care why. I just think, because SFG 1220 tells me I need to do it, I'm going to do it. And I think that is the root cause of it. So if we've got clients in this room that can loosen that and set a vision around those 5 variables, you'd be amazed at how the change then runs down the chain, because then suddenly you're empowering your engineers. So that was the other thing from Red Bull that we learned, was if you say that room's got a problem with humidity or temperature or whatever, go and let them go and solve it. Engineers love solving problems. Don't tell them what the problem is. Right? And they come back and say, I think it's X, Y, and Z. They try it. If it fixed it, the data would tell. If it didn't, they do something else. So the cultural change bit can all run off those 5 things as well.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because there's a new ISO standard about facilities management, and it says that facilities is moving from being delivering services to supporting and improving business. And I think that's exactly it. We've got to have the data and we've got to have the knowledge and the evidence to go to our businesses and show how we support and improve the core business, the core processes, whatever we want to call them. But without that data, we can't do it.
And the other question I would ask is, if you didn't do some of those things I'm talking about, and in 5 years' time, someone puts a grievance into HR saying you caused me cancer, or you've made my eyes degenerate because of the light levels, or you're causing me to go deaf, has anybody got an HR policy in their organisation that would deal with that? Serious question.
To varying degrees, I would suspect.
I think you'll find that would become a legal case and it would create case law, and then off the back of that we would end up with legislation in the Health and Safety Work Act. But until someone does it, we don't know. But do you want to be that organisation that's in the paper over that one?
It's interesting because in the manufacturing areas, we are exceptional at all of this. Exceptional, because we have to be. but it's all about protecting product. It's nothing to do with people.
Yeah.
So we will spend absolutely millions on protecting product.
Clean environments.
But when it comes to actually thinking about an office facility and saying how do we protect the people within this facility, where's the interest in that? So somehow you've got to turn that around and apply it equally to the people within that building. And over-occupying buildings is becoming an increasing problem, where the measures that you're talking about, you know, they would just be frightening if you were taking those measures and reading them out.
What I would say, and because it sounds like I'm being critical, but the FDs tend to make these big decisions around space and so on. If you take different data to them, they probably make a different decision. FDs, for all their faults, are data-driven individuals. If you only put on the piece of paper, here's your lease, here's the occupancy, here's the opportunity, what decision are they going to make? If you also said, but if you do that, be aware we've got an issue on health here which could cause you X, Y and Z other problems, the FD would probably say, all right, well, why don't we increase the budget over here slightly to mitigate that? Do you see what I mean? It's like we're not helping ourselves if all we're doing is doing space utilisation.
Okay. I think at that point, I think we've got a question or a comment from the audience. Have we got a microphone at all that we could...
I can speak loud if they haven't. So Michael Roger, SAP, I want to take that point further because I firmly believe it's a strategic piece above what you're talking about, which is convincing the board of the top line value that an FM organisation can bring. So our board passionately care about revenue and margin. Yeah. But the third most important thing for our board is employee engagement. So if we improve employee engagement by 1 percentage point, that's worth 40 million operating income to SAP. If we can improve our business health culture index by 1 percentage point, that's 80 million operating income to SAP. So when you've got those levers, and we, as FM, touch all of those areas, we touch brand value. SAP's brand is 39 billion, it's worth 39 billion. And what we do with our buildings has a big effect on the brand of SAP. So the way we've attacked it is to take that strategic piece and got to the board and said, right, we play into all these areas. And attraction, retention, just talked about that. Again, 40 million every single percentage point, we can change that. So we try to convince the board that the FM in SAP is playing massively into those areas, including innovation capability as well with our staff. And we're then actually linking that directly to the measures. And these measures, we haven't defined those measures, our controlling finance people have defined those particular figures. So our strategy has been very much to take that to the SAP board and say, right, FM are playing into this. And what we've done is we've talked to our customers in depth. And we've got every line of business head to say, okay, how much percentage do you think the facility organisation plays into each of these areas? So the proposition to the board, and we've got some good numbers, no one said zero, we've got some good numbers and percentage points. So our leverage with the board is, these are major top line value drivers for you. You need to, and you do care about them. We play into them, our customers are saying we play into them, right, invest in a modern, efficient workplace, we can get a great return on top line value, not bottom line. Because the day jobs, or looking at the plant, on machinery, we have to do that. The board expect that as a day job. If we can then move that argument to the top line value of them, we're getting so much more traction. And I believe, again, I admire what you've done in your building, but we're getting away these days from traditional workstations to ways of working, flexibility, choice. And we in SAP, we looked at our portfolios, 50% of our workplaces are empty. And that's because people's way of working is changing. And we need to adapt. And I think the beauty of that argument is we can design workplaces which have got flexible ways of working, in essence, to improve our utilisation, build some buildings and save money. So again, that's another lever for the board. We can have a win-win situation.
It's interesting on that point. Everything you say I agree with, by the way. I think the great FM directors these days have got that, they find that thread at the board level and then they just push everything towards that. What I was just going to say on that is I think we're going to see a trend over the next 5 to 10 years of people coming back into place. Because I think as we become more global and people are going off around the world doing professional service, because I think one of my main thought processes is about brain, as you can probably tell. And after Brexit, we're selling ourselves around the world, whatever it is, next cure for cancer, next fuel, whatever it might be. That's where the real money at GDP level is. So we're going to have people flying all over the world to go and see people. And when they come back, they're going to need to collaborate fast. They're going to need to come up with the next idea and then go out. So having people in their house or in Costa or in WeWork doesn't necessarily deliver that outcome unless you know why you're using those spaces. So I think that you might have spaces empty quite a lot of the time, but the organisation wants them ready and able to perform to their USP, because the other thing we've got to remember here is that a building is a great opportunity for companies to make their own USP and their own brand and a brand value. But I think that we will see a culture change. People come and they'll have less buildings and less space potentially, but what they do have becomes really great, flexible space, and they know why they've got it, and it's got their DNA in it. Absolutely. This one size fits all of managing buildings is going to go.
And don't be frightened to design workplaces for your customers. Some of the best ideas for facilities in our organisation have come from our customers. And some crazy ideas which we developed and make them work. But some of them were very crazy when they started, but some of the most successful ones have developed those crazy ideas into something that really works. So the message from me is always listen to your customers. And that's to my team as well, is always be open and design the space with your customers for their use. The end result also is they're going to be much prouder of that space because they have designed it. It's not being designed by a remote organisation. It's designed with them for their use. And that's a very key point.
We have, we've talked very much about one building on our site. It's a small building amongst 103 acres, and it's one of the corporate buildings, and their needs are very different than the needs in the manufacturing space, who are working in very, very old facilities with no Costa outlets and no fancy sofas and all of those things. And they have little quiet hubs and corners, and it's about how does individual workplaces need to operate within their space, and how can they best use their space. You're absolutely right that I can't design a space for people. You've got to actually engage with those people and watch how they work. If you look at the apprentices that come through, it's quite interesting if you just observe people. You look at the apprentices, they drive me bonkers, because they just sit with their feet on the chairs, and dirty chairs, I'm going to have to get those clean. But it's trying to look at how do people work, and trying to accommodate all of the different generations that we've got as well, because not one size fits all. Yeah. So it's adapting to the workplace. Science is leading the way in terms of some of the workplaces we're going to see in the laboratories. And how do you have your work-up space close to your lab space, and all of those sorts of things that minimises the footprint but gives that scientist exactly what they need at any one time. There are so many different generations and disciplines we've got to try and accommodate.
It's really interesting what you said about apprentices, because I haven't seen that. I've seen young people coming into workplaces and adapt to how they think they should behave, because they look around them and they look at the majority of people already working there, and they think that's how to behave. And I think that that's quite sad, because we recruit people into our organisations because they bring something new to us, and then we expect them to act in the way that I think it was Steve Jobs, wasn't he, who said, we don't recruit smart people and tell them how to do their jobs. We recruit smart people to tell us how to do our work. And I think, we've got to be really careful of expecting people to just fit in to the status quo.
But equally, we have a duty of care to those people as well. So, it worries me when I see those apprentices sat on a chair with their legs crossed and their laptop on their knee, because actually, years down the line, that's going to cause them a health problem. So you've got to try and quirk the workplace to suit the people, but equally you've got to educate the people to look after themselves as well.
We're running out of time, so we've probably got time for one or two more questions before I attempt to sum up. Anybody got any comments or questions? Oh, suddenly they all go quiet. Yes.
That's the thing from TVRE. Just thinking about next generation and all the things you mentioned was engaging with IT departments. What do you see, and how do you see technology becoming more involved and more partnered with FM user experience? Have you say that in your own organisation, what you're doing?
I don't know if you all had the question over here, but the question was about how do you engage more with IT and technology and the user experience?
Technology to enhance user experience in our buildings, whether that's employees, guests, clients. How do you see that evolving in your spaces? It's vast, isn't it?
I mean, it goes to some of the things you're talking about, but some of the really simple things that we're talking about is, how does a visitor come to site and check themselves in? Why have you got to have a lady sat on reception and a big queue of people waiting to check in? Why can't they just do it remotely? You know, the systems are intelligent enough to be able to do that. How can I see off my phone where the nearest meeting room is that's available? How can I report a fault without having to go back to my desk or ring somebody up? You know, how do we get that intelligence of what's going on? How do you use your intelligence in the ceilings to tell us what's going on in the building? IT are really switching on to the whole FM thing. I think they've suddenly woke up to, well, this is a really interesting area to get involved in. I don't know, you...
Yeah, I think the start, I mean, in any change you've got your people, your process and your technology. I think you need to decide what you're trying to achieve, and then I think you need to, really interesting stuff I've seen in the last few years is where people are doing journey mapping. So by the visitors or by the type of worker you are, like highly mobile or highly office or whatever it might be, and then using your existing technology. I think people will be surprised, even older BMS systems these days, you can get good data out of access control, that sort of stuff. And I think one of the things that really resonates with me around that stuff is that if you could get to the office and you could tap a card somewhere and it says, we noticed you've shared 20 emails with Bob in the last 2 days. He's sitting in desk 15 on floor 5. Do you want to go sit next to Bob? Absolutely no way. Yeah. But do you see what I mean? But that drives to your collaboration point, is that I think the IT teams are getting really pushed to do flexible shared working, but collaborate. And I genuinely think you cannot collaborate if you don't have empathy with a person. So we're going to have to drive this spending time with people. But also you might come to the office and say, oh, look, I really need a quiet space today. I know by the task I've got to do, so you could press a button and it could say, look, here's 4 options for you. And these are the conditions they're set at, which you know in your own preference. Yep. So there is a bit of choice, but actually within a confined box, you could then go and choose to do that. So that's a very simple way, I think, of doing user interaction. Everybody's got an app these days, right? But is it really important to lift up and down the car park barrier? I don't think so. Probably more important to start giving them some push information to say, actually, toilets are closed on floor 5 today, or we're doing a refurb, we're doing this, to start using it to build your credence up in the organisation, and taking the stuff I'm talking about where you can be proactive, you can start pushing messages out to people and say, actually, we don't think, based on the weather outside, floor 5 is a good place to work today, so we've closed it.
How do you engage with the individuals? Something I've been thinking about recently is, how do you make every individual's day the best day that it could possibly be? You know, and that's from the minute they leave home, you know, what's the traffic going to be like today? You know, when I get in my car, my phone says to me, it's going to take you 28 minutes to get to work. They always forget about the traffic jam close to, but at least it gives me an indication. And if you could take that technology and expand that and say, well, actually, there's a big queue at the Costa today, don't bother going there, go to this one, or, you know, this office is really full, go here, or the toilets are shut, or the car park's full. How do you make the day really terrific? Because it's those things early on that set you up for your day, isn't it?
That's,
you know?
Those central class people I mentioned earlier on, that's a big part of what they do. They've got this whole thing about cognitive load and cognitive switch off. So if you've had a bad journey to work and you walk into your building and it's horrific, like it's noisy or the colours are wrong, it just shuts you down. Yeah. And there's a really interesting thing about what you're saying there, and actually you can then use that to say to people, we really care about your role. So call centre is a good example, not the easiest job in the world, not the most inspiring space. And if they've had a bad journey to work and they've had a bad interaction as soon as they walk through the door, that's probably having an impact on your customers. So I think trying to pick some of those environments, and in your world as well, you've probably got some good ones like that, where you could say, right, what is the journey map? How does that affect them? And then help them educate themselves in terms of how they might make the best out of, I don't know, their space or even their life. I mean, the scary one here is you start going over that boundary into their life. Like, we haven't talked about nutrition, have we? Are we going to get to the point in the next 20 years when an employer, I know, but an employer, Liz, could start saying, I don't want you to have 2 pints after work, Mark, because I know the next day you have a productivity drop. I mean, that's where we could go with this stuff. So I think there's some interesting questions about user experience, making you a great day, which then crosses a line into where does the organisation stop?
But my passion for this, just to close off, my passion for this, move out of the office space and into manufacturing spaces. Because we all care too much about the people that are in the offices, and actually the people that are really producing and actually bringing money into the business are those people that are working in the factory. So how do we apply all the good things we do for the people in the office to the people in the factory?
And also, and really on a sort of wrapping up, what about the people who provide the facilities management services? Because these are the people who we expect to work quite often in horrendous conditions. You know, if you've got cleaning operatives whose mess room is the cleaning cupboard, I mean, how can we expect them to do great work if we don't give them a great environment to work in? So I think as people delivering facilities management, we've got to think about the people working in our teams as well and give them a great place to work. We forget, I think, sometimes about them. So we started off with, I had a question about the award-winning workplace and does it really matter? And I think we realised, yes, of course it matters. But what we've got to do then is not just look at the initial design, but to keep redesigning the workplace to meet the needs of the organisation and the individuals within it, giving them choice, if we can, giving them choice about air quality, temperature, lighting, all those great things. The Simpson smell, yeah, the common sense things that really make our work day effective or not. I think there'll be lots of other discussions that go on during the day, but thank you both very much indeed. Can we say thank you to Christine and Mark? Well, that was a bit different to the usual debates, hopefully. I hope you found it interesting. It's time now for our first networking and meetings session. So I think you all have your schedules. So we're running a couple of minutes late, so if I could ask you to head to your meetings if you have them. The networking area is just across and to the left, and we'll see you back in here for the next session at 9:50. Thank you.